All right, so Senate candidate John Fetterman is back at it again. This time he is railing against the airline industry, which, if you guys weren't aware, right now we are having massive levels of shortages and cancellations on flights. And basically the reasoning behind this, which we're going to get into here in a second with a great breakdown from the Washington Post, is no surprises due to corporate greed and slashing of their workforces and general mistreatment of their workers throughout the COVID pandemic. But John Fetterman is stepping up to the plate, unlike the Democratic establishment and the leadership of the party, and actually putting forward enforcement mechanisms to make sure that these corporations are held accountable for misleading people and canceling their flights. So we're going to start here from Jeff Stein with this proposed solution, and then I'll give you guys a little bit more background on exactly why this is happening. But here from Jeff Stein, he says, John Fetterman calls for Biden administration to fine airlines $27,500 per passenger for every flight they cancel that they knew that they didn't have enough staff to fly for, which this is what they've basically been doing. They're overbooking their flights intentionally and, basically screwing people over in the process who are just coming to the airport at the last minute and then, finding out that their flights have been canceled, which, again, as he's pointing out here, is something that these airlines knew was going to be an eventual inevitability, but basically decided to prioritize their own bottom lines over the consumer in this instance. But just to get into a little bit more details on exactly what he is proposing here, he said, quote, "So now as airlines are getting busier, they are over-promising, under-delivering, and leaving consumers in the dust. According to some airline workers, airlines are even booking passengers on flights that they know that they will not have enough staff to operate." He says this is unacceptable. It's long past time for our government to step in and bring some order to the situation. The Department of Transportation needs to take action. They should start fining airlines up to $27,500 per passenger. I mean, that's just, it seems like it's a massive amount there, but, if the goal is to actually crack down on them, and these are obviously massive billion-dollar corporations who got billions of dollars in bailout funds throughout the COVID pandemic. I mean, yeah, that seems like it's a reasonable amount, but they should be fined $27,500 per passenger for every flight that they cancel that they knew that they didn't have the staff to fly on. And just as the Obama administration did in 2009, whenever airlines left a plane on the tarmac for over 3 hours, the DOT must look into ways to ensure the airlines are compensating consumers for sunk costs, and it's the very least they can do for violating the trust of their consumers. And he finishes off saying the government has a responsibility to hold these airlines accountable. Taxpayers saved them, and now it's their turn to hold up their end of the deal. So I think that he's 100% correct on this, and you're going to see why when we get into more of the details here on exactly how this entire situation came about. So here from the Washington Post, they say flight cancellations stressing weary travelers as July 4th approaches. They say travelers have long been encouraged to pack patience and be flexible when flying, but thousands of delays and cancellations this year are testing their mettle. Pandemic-era problems that hobbled the national air system as it struggled to regain footing last summer have not abated, despite pledges from airline executives of a renewed focus on reliability. And they continue saying the problems persist despite billions in pandemic relief funds that the U.S. airlines received to keep workers on the job. Did they keep those workers on the job? No, they did not. Surprise, surprise. Here from The Guardian, United Airlines, this is just one example, received billions in COVID aid. Now thousands of workers could lose their jobs. And also here from ProPublica, they say the Trump administration allowed aviation companies to take bailout funds and lay off workers, says the House report, which was the exact precise opposite of what the stated intention of this bailout money was for. The whole point of it was to give them money so that they could maintain their workforce while there were, a lack of demand or a sinking of demand throughout COVID as people were flying less. But they chose not to do that. They chose to continue to use loopholes and workarounds in order to lay off their workers and, pressure them to quit their jobs. And now we're left with the situation we have right now. But they continue saying, they say, but with another surge in air travel expected for the July 4th holiday and airlines scrambling to find pilots and other workers, passengers and analysts alike are worried that the system is poised for more summer meltdowns. And they say the weekend of Father's Day and Juneteenth, thousands of travelers were left fuming after more than 3,000 flights were canceled and more than 19,000 were delayed. And even Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, fresh off a virtual meeting with airline executives, which was massively pathetic, the previous day to press for more accountability, was not spared. And they say even his flight got canceled and he had to drive to New York after his flight was canceled from Washington. So, I mean, you're literally the head of the Department of Transportation. You're having a virtual meeting with these airline executives where he basically just pulled a Joe Biden Biden and like strongly encouraged them to fix their corrupt and inefficient practices, but didn't really propose any concrete action to be taken against them. But, yet to be seen if he'll take John Fetterman's advice here and actually do something substantive about it. But think about how fucking embarrassing it is that you are literally the guy who is in charge of public transportation, and you are like getting down on your hands and knees and begging them to fix the problem here politely, instead of just doing your fucking job as a representative of the most powerful office in the entire country and, doing something concrete to force them to either hire more people or offer better wages or, cut their executive pay, or like John Fetterman is proposing, forcing them to pay fines for misleading consumers. But he basically didn't do any of that. But they continue here saying, in a letter to Buttigieg ahead of July 4th, Nicholas Callio, the chief executive for Airlines for America, reiterated the industry's commitment to delivering safe and on-time product not only over the holiday weekend but throughout the summer. But he also laid some blame for recent problems on the National Air Traffic Control System, noting that one carrier estimated air traffic control issues were a factor in at least 1/3 of recent cancellations, kind of using weaselly language there, saying they were a factor. Okay, what degree were they a factor? Were they the main factor? Were they the only factor? And he says in at least 1/3 of recent cancellations. So in other words, 2/3 of the cancellations are due to other things like staffing shortages, etc. So kind of seems like this is a little bit of a cop-out. But they had some pushback saying that the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, pushed back on those assertions, saying that the airline industry is aware of steps that they have taken to address the concerns. And they had a quote here saying, after receiving $54 billion in pandemic relief to help save the airlines from mass layoffs and bankruptcy, the American people deserve to have their expectations met. I mean, yeah, that's the bare fucking minimum. And airlines are well aware of these measures, as their representatives sit next to the FAA staff at our command center and participate in the calls, etc. And they finally finish off here saying consumer advocates, lawmakers, and travelers are asking why, 2 years after airlines began receiving infusions of cash, the system remains in disarray. And they got another quote here from William McGee, a senior fellow for the aviation and travel at the American Economic Liberties Project. And he said, this is really an unacceptable situation. They got that big bailout with grants and loans, and there was only one caveat. You need to make sure that your staffing stays up. So what did the airlines do? They found a loophole, and they managed to encourage people to leave, which is exactly what Congress asked them not to do. But again, we knew that this loophole was in place when these bailouts were happening. It's not as if like, whoops, we made a mistake and we found out afterwards that they weren't abiding by this. This was a loophole that was specifically and intentionally put in there by the Trump administration, or under the Trump administration, assisted by Democrats, in order to allow them to basically do this while simultaneously receiving tens of billions of dollars in bailout funds. So, at the end of the day, it seems like this is a pretty simple problem of, corporations. This is something you could apply to the entire American economy in multiple different sectors. You have corporations who got billions and billions of dollars in bailout funds from the federal government, and instead of using that on what it was actually intended for, on protecting their workers and maintaining their staffing levels so that they were ready for an increase in demand later down the line, instead of doing any of that, they basically took the money and ran away with it. And so we're left with the situation that we have right now. And so going back to what John Fetterman was proposing, given that situation that we just outlined, it seems like it's pretty reasonable to enforce these types of punishments at the very bare minimum, instead of allowing these corporations to keep getting away with this cycle of looting the treasury and fucking over their workers on a regular basis. So, credit to John Fetterman for yet again putting his neck out there and actually doing something radical and proposing government solutions that would probably be effective to situations that are being caused by capitalist greed and price gouging. I also noticed that he had another good take recently on the increased rise in gas prices. He wasn't blaming it on stimulus checks to average Americans. He actually went after the fossil fuel corporations and specifically called them out for price gouging the American people. So seems like he's been pretty consistent when it comes to these issues of like corruption and bailout money, etc. So again, John Fetterman clearly the superior candidate. And just to give you guys a little bit of an update on his race against Dr. Oz, according to all of the polling data that we have right now, obviously this this is subject to change. Who knows what the fuck is going to happen in November? Who knows how much John Fetterman, as a very strong candidate by himself, is going to be hurt by Democrats' complete incompetence. But nonetheless, even with the situation we have right now with Biden having an absolutely atrocious approval rating, John Fetterman has been curb stomping Dr. Oz, and you can see that evidenced by the fact that Dr. Oz himself is sending out these emails to his supporters, basically begging them to donate and support his campaign more, because you can see down there at the bottom, the polling data is showing John Fetterman with nearly a 10-point lead. But I think that this is just absolutely fucking amazing and hilarious that you would put this out to your supporters, just reaffirming the fact that you are in fact a massive loser. But I guess keep sending those out. I love to see it. But also on top of that, I mean, it's not that surprising why John Fetterman is not doing that great. Basically, his entire campaign strategy that I've seen so far has been to actually attempt to distance himself from the Trump endorsement and try to lean more into presenting John Fetterman as like this crazy radical socialist. I mean, this was just a meme that he posted the other day. You can see here, I'll actually zoom out of that because it's kind of harder to read, but he said, John Fetterman, noun, as if this is like a dictionary definition. Bernie Sanders, socialist to the left of Joe Biden, based and absolutely awesome if that's the case. Maybe it is on a couple of different policies, but I mean, he basically is. You could call him a Bernie Sanders socialist. I don't know if he would call himself a socialist, more of a social democrat, or really just somebody who believes in like basic welfare programs and unionization, etc. But he says Bernie Sanders, socialist to the left of Joe Biden, a political puppet, a radical, wrong for Pennsylvania. So, I mean, listen, if you're to the left of Joe Biden, that doesn't make you a radical. That makes you perfectly in line with average Americans who support policies like the Green New Deal, like Medicare for all, like a $15 minimum wage, like, criminal justice reform, all of the different basic policies that John Fetterman seems to support at this point. So, good luck to Dr. Oz on this strategy of basically just describing how based John Fetterman is. But I do hope that he wins this election because, no politician is going to bail us out of the situation that we're in right now. But John Fetterman, I think, definitely stands apart from the rest of the corporate ghouls within the Democratic Party, and that he could be somebody who definitely has a similar like broad-based working class appeal to the American people, and could definitely have a serious future in politics here in the United States.